little bit about myself. So I've taken I would say a very different path compared to my colleagues to get to where I am today. So yes, I am the Vice President of Research at one of the largest research-intensive university in the country, but I did not come through the academic rank. In fact, I started my working career in the federal government and the National Research Council, and I see some of my former colleagues in the audience. And I was responsible for the creation of what was at the time the first pure-play semiconductor photonics foundry in North America, called Canadian Photonics Fabrication Center. And the raison d'être of the CPFC was to de-risk technology and de-risk investment for industry. And I'm told that the CPFC is doing extremely well in meeting what the goals were back in 2002. So congrats to the team. I was also responsible for leading a national effort in printable electronics, hand in hand with industry. I feel very connected to Kanata North, and you might be asking why. It's because I was also a founder of a high-tech company, and I felt strongly that the place to incubate such a high-tech company with my 54 employees was right here, just down the street. And like many of you, I was responsible, amongst many other things, to do the dog and pony show in raising capital. And like many of you, I took this red eye between San Francisco and Toronto too many times to remember. So that's about myself. About the University of Ottawa, so I became VP Research at the university only earlier this year. And about the University of Ottawa, you might not know, but we are the largest bilingual university in the world with 43,000 students, 5,000 employees, and 100 buildings on 3 different campuses. So really a city within a city. So you can imagine what kind of technologies could go into this. So I'm just excited about what the future holds for us. We have 10 faculties. We have the largest law faculty in the country. We have a faculty of medicine. And people might not know this, but the 5 hospitals in Ottawa are connected through the University of Ottawa, through the Faculty of Medicine in the research endeavor. So the Ottawa Hospital Research Institute, the University of Ottawa Heart Institute, the CHIO RI, the Montfort RI, etc., are all connected, and the research ecosystem that goes on in the health and the medical system comes into fruition through the Office of the Vice President of Research at the university. So that's very challenging. We're also considered one of the U15 universities, very intensive in research. You might not know that the University of Ottawa every year hits pretty high in the research list, about $325 million plus per year. That classes up about 9 nationally and in research intensity, because we don't have that many 1,300 prof at the university. It brings up to about number 5 last year in research intensity. So that's about myself and about the University of Ottawa. So you recognize this. So I was part of this ecosystem at one point, and I can tell you that many of you will say about Kanata North that it's a place to live, work, and play. We've all heard this. But there is one attribute that is missing in that three-word sentence, and that's the word learn. So Kanata North, to live, work, play, and learn. And the announcement tonight is about the University of Ottawa coming to Kanata North and establishing a physical presence just down the street on Leggett Drive. So on 325 Leggett Drive. So this is the first step. So this is where it says in my note here, the crowd is supposed to cheer and applaud and all that. So where did we come? Thank you. So where did we come? So why come here? Okay. So what's the raison d'être of doing this? So many of you will know that most high-tech park, nationally, internationally, involve the strong linkages between industry and universities. It is true for Silicon Valley, Palo Alto with Stanford. It's true for the Optics Valley in Tucson, Arizona with the University of Arizona. It's also true for the Research Triangle Park in Raleigh, North Carolina with the University of North Carolina. It's also true in Europe. It's also true in Asia. Hsinchu, for example. Hsinchu High-Tech Park is in close proximity and interacting quite closely with the National Chiao Tung University. So the opportunity is we have one of the U15 universities at our doorstep of Kanata North, and what is it that we can do together? So last year, I commissioned a study by a consultant to go and question the SMEs and MNEs of Kanata North. And the questions were very simple. What are your needs? What is it that you want? Do you know about the University of Ottawa? And it was quite interesting what came back. First of all, even though we're only 20 kilometers, 2 hours down the 470, no, I'm joking. We're only 20 kilometers away from each other. We don't know each other all that well. Okay, that's one of the outcomes of this survey. But really, the message coming back to this, to the survey that was done with a number of companies here in Canada was that we need talent, we need training, and maybe even opportunity to do R&D with one of the large university in intensive research. And that's what we're going to bring to this region. So what's the opportunity? Well, the opportunity is exactly that, is to bring people together and working together in trying to put Kanata North on the map with our support, or maybe it's vice versa, helping us bringing the ecosystem together, building the innovation ecosystem that exists. So there is, so you might be wondering, why is it that our partnership is so important? There is a couple factoid that I would like to leave you with. Maybe there's more than two factoid, but couple starting with two. I read recently that 65% of children entering primary school today will hold jobs that don't yet exist. 70% of young adults, 25 years and older, that don't hold a post-secondary education diploma or degree will be ruled out of a job. So many people say that the link between education and the workforce is broken. There's a skill gap that exists, and there's also a communication gap that exists. And that's what we're trying to bring together, is to remove that communication and that skill gaps. And that's what we're hoping to do with this announcement today. Okay, so this is the triple Elex that we've all heard about, right? So universities working closely with industry and government. You know what? We're in the G7 capital. That is, the federal government is at our doorstep. Let's try to make the most out of this, okay? They have a number of federal programs that could help us bridging that gap between the universities and industry. Let's capitalize on that. So one thing that we've heard loud and clear from that study that was commissioned last year is access to talent. So you might not know this, but the University of Ottawa was one of 4 universities in Ontario to create a master's program in applied AI with and without a co-op program. So you've heard about artificial intelligence and the application of artificial intelligence, and certainly for Kanata North is something that is quite prime. We can talk about artificial intelligence, and we're going to hear about that from our speaker tonight, Jason Miller, about artificial intelligence in the applications of autonomous vehicles, or maybe even in the health sector. This is something that hospitals are looking at quite aggressively. So skill-based training is of the most important, accessing that talent. The second thing that we heard was access of training. The reskilling of employees is now the new normal worldwide. So what can university do to help you do that? Okay, so working together to co-create programs in order to better bring education back to the skilled workforce that you have here in Canada. That's something that we are proposing to doing collaboratively with the people here in Canada. So one of Telfer's initial learning offering will be a graduate level credit program, Telfer School of Management that is at the university, of micro-certificate. You've heard of these micro-certificate, where you can add these micro-certificate. It will give you at the end of 2 years a full-fledged MBA program. So that's the kind of things that I'm talking about here. Access to solution. So working with one of the top 10 research-intensive university in the country is something that is certainly of value. in a number of applications, not just in the hard engineering and sciences or medicine or health, but also in the social sciences and humanities. And we're going to hear some example of that. Maybe even with our law faculties, talking about technologies, patents, IP portfolios, etc. So those are the kind of things that we can bring to this ecosystem here. So the vision that we have is, maybe I should mention, as Marianne is leaving, so I gave the, so I should mention that I gave a similar presentation to the Kanata North business, the BIA, okay? And Jenna, thank you, Jenna, was the one who, I mean, Jenna and I have been talking about this for quite some time. And Marion was such a supporter of us coming here to Kanata North to be building this partnership that we have with you. So thank you very much, Marion. And no, I understand you have a meeting, so you go and do your thing. But now Jenna is up to bigger and better thing, and congratulations on your election. So when I gave that presentation to the Kanata North BIA, it was extremely well received, and I think we hit really the right resonance with our colleagues. So the idea here is we're going to be starting small. Okay, we're going to be building programs. We're going to be building seminars, series. What we heard is we want talent close by, so co-op effort will be diverted into this location here. You go, when is we have a co-op, December 6th, we have a co-op fair at one of our partner, which is YUTV, right here in Kanata North. So the idea is to bring the talent in here, and then we can start working together. We understand that we might have some challenges with our co-op program. We're going to work it out with our industry colleagues here in Kanata. And the idea is to intensify this relationship and then to expand it over time. So this is the way it's going to work in the short term. So the idea is to how to give access to talent, training, and solutions. So we're going to start, as I just mentioned, in bringing co-op fairs in the region. We can also talk about a series of seminar series which will be targeting maybe upper management, lower middle management level, to talk about things like integrated marketing, sales strategies, change management, things along that line. Then we're going to be talking about professional development, seminar series on workshop on topics such as 5G, cybersecurity, quantum technologies that could be of relevant to the region. And then, of course, what is close to my heart, of course, is the innovation portion of this partnership that could take place. So in conclusion, just want to mention that since I gave that presentation this summer in the presence of Jenna at the time, we also spoke to the HR Council here in Kanata North, and a program committee was put in place. Veronica, you own this program committee, so it's a program which is split half and half between industry or Kanata North and the University of Ottawa, and the idea is to co-create some program and making sure that we make the adjustment necessary in order to meet the need of industry. So congrats to this group, which has met how many times ago? Already 4 or 5 times, so they're quite intense since September, so the first official event will be this coming December, and it is also an event coming in January. Like I mentioned, we're going to be opening our doors in early in the new year at 535 Legates. And on this, I would like to thank you very much for your attention. And now it gives me great opportunity to introduce our next speaker from the University of Ottawa, Jason Miller. So Jason is an engineer and a philosopher who spent most of his time thinking about the design, ethics, and governance of robotics and AI. Before returning to school full-time to pursue degrees in philosophy, Jason worked as an engineer designing aerospace electronics manufacturing processes, airport terminals, and communications. We just recruited him from Silicon Valley. Jason, the floor is yours.
That's okay, I'll fix it up. All right, just give me a second to switch over here. Well, thank you very much, Sylvain, and thank you for inviting me. As Sylvain says, I just got here a few months ago. I'm readjusting. And what I'd like to talk to you tonight about is the research that I'm planning on doing while at the University of Ottawa. And you know, the title I've chosen is The Promise and Perils of Automated and Connected Vehicles. Leave it to an ethicist to talk about something like this. But really, at the heart of my talk is, is the thinking that I have around innovation in ethics. That sounds like a strange phrase, I think, but I will hope to connect all of the pieces, at least start to connect the pieces for you tonight, to give you a sense of what I mean when I'm talking about innovation in ethics and how it relates to what's going on in Kanata North here. So, a little bit small, but that's okay. First of all, I'm an engineer. Started my career as an engineer, cut my teeth up the road at a company here in Kanata, designing ASICs. Also, after that, decided to go back and pursue studies in philosophy and applied ethics. I give this sort of additional intro because it often doesn't, it's not apparent immediately what an ethicist is doing talking about engineering, what an ethicist is doing talking about connecting with businesses in a place like Kanata. Now I'm a professor at the University of Ottawa. I'm at the School of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science. And what I'm doing there is really connecting the world of ethics to the world of computer science engineering. And I'll be talking about that specifically tonight. The research broadly is in the ethical engineering of robotics and artificial intelligence. And I'm going to connect all of this to the lab that I'm planning on building. It's in the works right now. And this is what I'm calling the Canadian Robotics and Artificial Intelligence Ethical Design Lab. It's called CRADLE for short. So let's talk a little bit about the activities that will be going on at CRADLE and how I hope to connect this to all of the stuff that you are working on. So in robotics and artificial intelligence, you've heard in the media, I'm sure, about all these high-profile ethical issues. I'll talk a little bit about those in a minute. But the work that I focus on connects three worlds broadly together to try to come up with solutions to these ethical issues in technology. I work on thinking a lot about ethical practice, or ethical engineering practice. So how do we get engineers to take things that ethicists are talking about or policymakers are talking about and really deeply connect it to the work that they're doing to make better products, to align it with human values, and to avoid and anticipate some of the issues that you see raised in the media, say like the issues with Facebook, with Twitter, issues that are coming up with autonomous vehicle technology. The other area that I focus on is the philosophical stuff. So this is the applied ethics. This is where you start researching deeply issues in philosophy to try to understand what's going on with the ethical landscape of a particular problem you're looking at. Also connecting with policymakers to think more deeply about how to develop policy that makes sense for innovators, how to connect innovators to policymakers so innovators can kind of anticipate what's going on in the policy world and build the technology accordingly so that they don't have any surprises or they don't run into any problems down the road. And those are the three areas that I focus on. And you'll see, in all of the work that I do, I try to bring all of these three groups of people in contact with one another to have more sophisticated conversations about the world of policy, how that connects more deeply to engineering practice, and the kinds of ethical issues we need to do more research on in order to understand what makes sense from a policy perspective and also what makes sense from an engineering perspective. So, that's a kind of vague overview of the research. For the past year or 2 years or so, I've been working with some specific groups. I really want to drive home the fact that this is not, so although I come from a social sciences and humanities background, there is a thirst for this kind of knowledge in industry that is growing because of the kinds of issues that we're seeing in the media all the time. These are very real concerns that people have. So I spent a year, as Sylvain mentioned, in Silicon Valley last year doing research at Stanford through a gift from Apple. I was working with the autonomous vehicles group at Stanford and at Apple with various groups developing these methodologies that I'm working on to connect the design, the engineering and design world to the world of ethics and policy. Companies that I've been working with regularly, Intel, Daimler, Ford. I know there's some connection here with Ford in the region. I'm really excited to hear more about that and to hopefully find ways to connect the research that we're going to be doing at University of Ottawa in the lab at Cradle. To that, we also do in our group research with policymakers. So we've been engaged with Transport Canada for a couple of years now, working on autonomous and connected vehicle policy. We've also been, what happened there? We've also been working with the Michigan Department of Transportation on thinking about ways of developing more meaningful policy around autonomous vehicles. And what I want to say is that there's an opportunity here, and a question mark and an opportunity. The question is, how do I connect all of this work that I've been doing to stuff that's going on here in Kanata, right? So it's the idea, like, where are you going to insert are you going to insert your logo? How does this all work? Why would you do that? So why collaborate with Cradle, the University of Ottawa? Okay. The reason that I could give many reasons, the reason I'm going to give is kind of the fire and brimstone version of this talk. There are a bunch of different ways that I could frame this, and I'll get to some of those a little bit later. The easiest story to tell right now, and the one that resonates immediately, especially when I talk to people in the AV industry, is that the regulatory writing is on the wall. You see that even with companies like Facebook, you know, Mark Zuckerberg getting kind of dragged in front of Congress to answer questions. There's a lot of work going on in AI right now around these kinds of issues. So, you know, I'll talk about a couple of those in a minute, but the regulatory writing is on the wall is the message that I want to lead in with. Okay, what does that mean? Well, let me give you a short history of autonomous vehicle ethics and policy that we've seen in North America emerging in the last few years. So a lot of you have probably seen some version of this problem in the media. So this is the kind of a representation of that question, like when the autonomous vehicle is about to hit this person or that person, it has to make some sort of decision about where to go. Does it go left? Does it go right? Does it kill the old person, the young person, the group of people, the single person? There's a lot of research going on in this. I don't focus on this, but it was a really interesting way of getting people thinking about ethics in autonomous vehicles, including regulators. So this really caught the imagination of the public and regulators globally. When I tell people I work in autonomous vehicle ethics, usually the first thing they say to me is, oh, you mean when the car has to decide when it hits the baby and I tell them yes and no. A couple of years ago, NHTSA, the regulatory body south of the border, came out with their first automated vehicle policy. So in that policy, they identified roughly 15 points that any company designing an automated system for vehicles would have to address in the design of those vehicles. One of those things was ethical considerations. When this policy dropped, I can tell you that nobody in industry understood what that meant in practice, and in the consultation process that follows, they voiced that concern. We get that ethics is interesting and important, but we do safety. Why do we need ethical considerations? You know, we have privacy lawyers for this kind of thing. Why do we need ethical considerations? And the kind of thinking that NHTSA had was broader than privacy, broader than safety. It had to do with these types of no-win scenarios that philosophers and other ethicists were talking about. A year later, so this is fast forwarding a year later, AV Policy 2.0 comes out as part of the regular annual review that they do for this, that they had planned to do for this policy. And what they'd done is they dropped the ethical considerations requirement. Okay, but I can tell you that up to this point, companies in the Valley at least, and in Detroit, were preparing these letters that they were supposed to send to the regulators to explain how they'd address these 15 points. They had really nothing clear to say about ethics. I know this for a fact. AV Policy 2.0 comes out, they drop the ethical considerations part, great. Don't have to demonstrate that we've done anything ethically. Those of us in the research community who are committed to researching ethics in autonomous vehicles took this as a bit of a blow. But when we dug deeper, what we found was in the FAQ section of NHTSA's website, when explaining that they dropped the ethical considerations. They said, look, ethics isn't going anywhere. The challenge here is that nobody knows what to do with it, right? Nobody knows how to connect ethics to the design of automated systems in the mobility space. So what we need to do is we need to work on that in industry. We'll work with industry. We'll develop these practices, processes, methods, frameworks, tools, whatever you want to call them. And so the ethical piece gets parked for a little while, but it's on the horizon. It's coming. It's coming in the AV space, and it's coming in other spaces as well. We see this when people are talking about bias in algorithms, when people are talking about fairness in algorithms, when people are questioning predictions that are made. It's coming in many different areas of robotics and AI, this ethical focus. And this is just one of those examples. So let me use two quick illustrative case studies to very quickly just ground this in real issues. Okay, case one, turn-by-turn democracy. You've all used turn-by-turn nav systems. A few years ago, a strange thing started happening in neighborhoods. As these systems were proliferating in society, everybody starts using their AV, turn-by-turn AV. How many of you have used your turn-by-turn to run an errand in the city and you don't know exactly where you're going, so you just hit the nav and then just follow it, like a kid's basketball practice, kid's soccer practice, kid's whatever. Yeah, most of hockey, whatever. We've all done this, right? Rather than looking on a map, you use your turn-by-turn. Well, these systems are going to be at the heart of autonomous and connected vehicle systems, right? These turn-by-turn nav systems. And what we saw happening with Waze and Google Maps a few years ago was that they were shifting traffic patterns so radically in certain neighborhoods because the algorithms were optimized to minimize the time from A to B, and only that, really, that neighborhoods were revolting. They were gaming the system. They were pushing back on the technology. They were resisting it. So in the case of Waze, people were putting fake construction signs in their neighborhoods. They were changing signage, right? They were parking cars in different places. They were lobbying to try to get their democratic voices heard to have this change, because it was amazing how quickly the power of an app could upset the balance of decision-making about where cars go, right? As soon as you automate this kind of thing, it really has a powerful impact on the immediate traffic patterns in a neighborhood or city. Then there are questions, how do you deal with this, right? If you extrapolate from the routing problem and the fact that there's congestion in a neighborhood that used to be quiet, what else does that mean in the future of automated and connected vehicles? You can imagine a system of an entire mobility system where the algorithms are controlling all aspects of the mobility system, access to mobility, distributing risks and benefits. So there are going to be places that are safer than they used to be, places that are more dangerous than they used to be for pedestrians, for cyclists. There are all sorts of distribution questions that come up, and they are all ethical in nature. So the question is, how do you distribute these risks and benefits within an autonomous and connected vehicle system, which is the new mobility system? Okay, second case study, just to sort of anchor these ideas in something concrete. I call this Millennial Concerns. So we've heard recently about employees at companies. So they tend to be described as millennials, younger employees, people who are maybe 5 to 10 years into the workforce. These employees have been lobbying their own CEO, their own executives, to force their hand on taking contracts with taking defense contracts, essentially. So what we see here is, for example, with Google, when Google employees found out that Google had signed a contract with the US Department of Defense to work on some technology, some top engineering employees quit, and others signed this letter of petition. They actually ended up changing Google's mind about entering into these contracts. Behind the scenes, there was a lot of activity internally as the company was trying to figure out how to respond to this. It's almost unheard of, where you would have just regular employees in a company petitioning the executives in public using these social media platforms that their companies are designing to force their hand on what kind of contracts and business they get into. This is almost unheard of, but it seems to be the future of the workforce, the way that employees are going to expect to be able to interact with their employers. In the case of Amazon, they were talking, the employees didn't want Amazon selling facial recognition software to police and law enforcement services for various reasons. So this upsets the balance of power in corporations in a really important way. So there's a question around this, companies are very concerned in Silicon Valley about attracting and retaining good talent. It's hard enough to get people who are working on AI. If it turns out that your company is going after valuable contracts, but contracts that are going to, for whatever reason, upset your workforce, you have a problem on your hand. This is all part of the package of ethics in AI that oftentimes people don't consider before designing a technology or entering into certain types of business. And the list of ethical issues is growing. So those are a couple of examples. This is within autonomous and connected vehicles and in any area where there's robotics and AI. You're dealing with questions about bias in AI, interpretability, justice, fairness, explainability, equity, access to resources, responsibility, mobility, privacy, accountability, democracy, freedom, security, power, transparency, safety. The list is growing. I can tell you that this list, I could not have compiled it the way to look like this 2 years ago, 3 years ago. This is rapidly exploding area of interest in the public, among employees, among corporations. Ethicists are talking about it, and I can tell you that companies are turning their attention to it in a very serious way. They're trying to figure out how to address these things in practice. So that's where I come in. And I'll return to this question: why collaborate with the lab that that I'm putting together at the University of Ottawa, or with the broader research community at University of Ottawa on these types of issues? Well, so the lab that I'm putting together, the research that I do, the people that I work with, the community at the University of Ottawa, I can tell you they're at the cutting edge of developing the methodologies, the frameworks, and the tools to address these ethical concerns in engineering. So working with engineers to develop and companies that are developing and innovating in the technology space to really figure out ways of putting these ethical considerations into practice upstream in the design process so that you can anticipate the kinds of issues that could come up in relation to these technologies. Could be the issues that you have, issues that your customers will have, impacts to society, could be all sorts of things that we're learning about and researching on the ethics and philosophy side, on the policy side, and helping to bring those to bear on the design cycle. So this is just a quick snapshot of the model that I've been working on over the last couple of years. It's an iterative design process that has very specific conceptual frameworks attached to it, tools to help people think through things. And the team of students that I will be assembling at the University of Ottawa at Cradle will be dedicated to researching these topics. How do we improve the tools? How do we improve engagements with engineers? How do we make sure policy makes sense for both society and innovators so that so that innovation can happen smoothly? The other thing is that at the University of Ottawa, one of the main reasons I came back, aside of from the fact that I love and live in Ottawa, is that the University of Ottawa is uniquely positioned as a leader in researching the ethical, legal, and policy issues around robotics and AI. There's a team at the university that is unmatched anywhere in Canada, and in most of the world, to be totally honest with you. And so that includes the Cradle Lab. We've got SEED, and we'll be hearing about that in just a minute in the next talk. There's the Center for Law, Technology, and Society, deal a lot with legal issues. And then there's the Institute for Science, Society, and Policy. There are just teams of researchers at University of Ottawa who are dedicated to addressing these issues specifically. And so just to bookend a little bit, so what would the connection look like? Well, it's all about leading on ethical innovation, right? As you saw with the AV ethics policy, or the AV policy, in the background, regulators are just waiting for somebody to describe how this stuff works in practice, and we're working on that. And so the companies that are doing this feel as though they are leading on this innovation, that they're poised to set the standards rather than follow them. And of course, that's the kind of cynical, almost the cynical version. The other version of this story is that you just make better technology when it aligns this way with people's expectations, their values, and the values of society. If you connect better with policymakers and regulators, early on in the design process, or when you figure out where you need to coordinate with your competitors in order to solve these coordination problems, maybe engage with regulators, we are seeing those strategies emerge now because this is a very complex space where the technologies, when they come together, the interactions are sometimes unexpected and often lead to these interesting externalities that engagement with policymakers can really help to solve. So that's the picture that I'm trying to draw about innovation in ethics at the University of Ottawa, and thank you for your time. Yeah, look forward to talking to you.
So Jason gave a very good example of that triple Elex, policymakers and regulators working with industry, working with the academic institutions. So that's the kind of things that I was talking about. So our second speaker this evening is Anand Anis, Professor Anand Anis. Anand is a professor of electrical and computer engineer at the University of Ottawa. She holds an NSERC chair in entrepreneurial engineering design and is also a coordinator of entrepreneurship and innovation in the Faculty of Engineering. I would like to acknowledge that our Dean of Engineering is also here this evening, Jacques Beauvais. Thank you, Jacques. Anand is very familiar with the Kanata North ecosystem. Before she joined the university, Anand was co-founder and chief technology officer at SEBA, an optical long-haul network company that employed 250 people at its peak. She also worked at Nortel Networks, conducting pioneering research in various areas of photonics, ranging from device physics to optical networking. Anand Anis.
Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. Thanks so much, Sylvain, for the introduction, and thank you for everybody being here. I see quite a number of familiar faces, so I'm glad to be back in Kanata. I've worked in Kanata for a number of years in my past. And let me give you a bit of a background of SEED, which is the Center for Entrepreneurship and Engineering Design that I run. And there is a motive for me starting this whole activity based on my background. And I graduated from the University of Toronto, like many people with a PhD in photonics. I joined Nortel Networks, like many people that are in my field, worked in the long-haul optical networking. And what I've seen is that I had back then to learn everything on the job. Part of the reason for that is the barrier for innovation were high. You, as a university, you could not teach your students many of the things we learned on the job. So what I found is, from a technology point of view, I had to learn most of my learning on the job, and in terms of the soft skills, I certainly was not ready for that marketplace coming out of one of the most prestigious universities in Canada. I believe that at the University of Ottawa, we're addressing this by enabling our students really to learn many things at the university. Now, part of the reason is that the barriers to innovation have been lowered. So a lot of our students can do many things that is existing in industry because there's open source software. There are hardware that is available that is actually much more available than it used to be 20 years ago. But what I want to focus on here is what we're doing at the University of Ottawa to enable our students to actually be market ready. So, oops, I went very fast. Okay, hopefully it doesn't move by itself. Okay, so at the center of what we do in the University of Ottawa, and particularly within engineering, we have a number of rapid prototyping facilities. Those rapid prototyping facilities enable students to work with their hands from day one at the university. We also provide them with a number of courses in engineering design so they can actually work with real clients from the time they enter the university. We have quite a number of competitions as well as extracurricular activities and professional development. Let me start with our rapid prototyping facilities. So, you know, when students come, they don't know many of the things that they need to do, and right from day one, they start working on our Maker Lab and the Manufacturing Training Center. The Maker Lab provides digital technologies for students, from VR technologies to 3D printers to microcontrollers, you name it. In terms of the Manufacturing Training Center, is a traditional machine shop, lathe, mill, drill press, CNC machines, you name it. Now, once students get accustomed to all these equipment, they actually can start using them at their own time. That is either in the makerspace, where digital technologies are available 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, or in the Bronzefield Center, where they can actually use the machine shop, again, at their own time. As they progress in the university, they start working in teams. Some of these teams go to international competitions, and there is also spaces for these students to actually work in their teams, whether small teams or large teams. Let me give you some pictures of our new STEM building. We just opened our new STEM building late in September, and this is some of our facilities there. Here's our makerspace with people looking at the 3D printers. We have 1,500 users. Just to give you an idea of the level, we have 1,500 users per year. Our makerspace is open to the community at large on Sundays. Here is an example of our Bronzefield Center. This is our machine shop, a student showing some of the visitors, and this is a part of the facilities. This is our teams. These are our car competitive teams. This is our, actually, this is a funny picture. You might not realize that it's a funny picture, but it's this is our super mileage car on Halloween day. So the students put some arms to the car over there because it was Halloween. So this is our Formula car, a Formula team working in the space. We typically have 200 users per year. Let me move to our courses. All our courses are client-based courses. What does that mean? It means that students from the first year start working with clients. It could be clients from industry. It could be clients from the community. We actually started in a very controlled way. In the first year, the client comes to the classroom. By the second year, actually, each student group work with a different client. And in the fourth year, we tell the students, we have handheld you enough. Now you go and find your own clients. All students present in Design Day. This is a picture of Design Day last year. And just to give you an idea of the extent, we have 700 students. We had 700 students participating with 106 teams, 40 judges from the community and industry. We have people from UITV that come every year and increase the crowd. We have people from Nokia, Jabil, you name it, come to our Design Day and participate. Some of the examples of the projects that students do. This is a first-year student that is extremely happy and smiling. This is actually a zero carbon footprint shed. So in addition to the building, which is for a civil engineering student, there is actually home automation inside, and actually it's a totally zero carbon footprint because they had solar panels right on the roof. And you might sort of say, okay, well, how is this related to anything? It's just a shed. But actually, these students made it modular, so they took a number of these sheds and took it to a northern community and built it for an indigenous family to use it after the finish of the project. This is another example of a project of our second-year students. Our second-year students worked with George, who has a handicap, and essentially George can't move his arms very much, so he had a problem in using his remote control. And it seems like a simple problem. Okay, do you really need a new remote control? Actually, try to operate your regular TV remote control with your foot at home, and you will know how hard it is. So he can move his feet, but he can't move his arms. So actually, the students created this colorful 3D printed remote control for George to be able to operate it and work on it. The picture that I want to tell you is with these projects, the students actually become very involved and become very invested. And we always talk about, oh, the young generation, that, you know, their work ethics is this and that. But I see otherwise every day in my classes. And I'll give you a particular example with this group. This group of students actually finished the project, and I thought this is the end of it. They did Design Day, they got their marks, and that was the end of the story. And lo and behold, in May, I got an email with this picture in there. And the student, Samir, said to me in the email, he said to me, well, we finished our classes, we realized that George needs a better prototype. So we spent our time in the summer doing the prototype for George and went and installed it in his home. That made us happy, and we thought it will make you happy too. That actually, to me, speaks to the level of commitment that our students have, and I just wanted to share that with you. Our fourth-year students work on entrepreneurship, technology entrepreneurship. Both our fourth year and our graduate students. This is in two different examples. On the left-hand side, this is two graduate mechanical engineering students. One of them was in my class. They started off thinking that they are going to make drones. So they started the class wanting to make drones. By the end of it, as they went into customer validation, discovered that they are not going to make drones. But they actually changed their business and found an opportunity in making equipment for drones, testing equipment for drones. I'm happy to say that a group like that is 3 years later, they are doing very well, they are profitable, and they are increasing. So this is a completely different example of a group of social entrepreneurs that actually wanted to do prostheses for refugees, for actually children in refugee camps, and that's all part of entrepreneurship and part of... We put a lot of effort in our entrepreneurial competitions, starting from the idea competition, you know, lots of applicants for ideas, not very well thought through, but it's just ideas, small amount of money, moving to sort of the concept, which is more like a business modeling, and validation, less applicant, more prizes, to the more serious one, which is the launching entrepreneurs. We get around 5 applicants per year. There's $90,000 in prizes, and I'm happy to say since we started this in 2012, there's only one company that actually went belly up out of all the companies that got this. We have a lot of extracurricular programs from Entrepreneurship Summer School, Startup Weekend, Difference Maker, you name it. I'm not going to belabor this point, but I want to spend a couple of minutes on our Makerspace Challenge. Every year we have a different Makerspace Challenge. And in there we like to introduce our engineering students to something multidisciplinary. So in the first year, we actually built, some of you might remember, we built a prosthetic hand for a 6-year-old Ottawa area boy that actually went in the headlines of the Ottawa Citizen for a couple of times. So that was a more on the biomedical side of things. The next year, we were approached by a physician in the London area that said, okay, pulse oximeters for measuring the oxygen is perfectly okay within North America, but it costs $600. If I want to actually develop one for a developing country, it needs to be less than $25. So we actually worked with this physician to develop exactly that, and our students did it. In 2016, we decided to change from the biomedical and introduce our students to the area of art. Engineers, many of our engineering students are not into art, and that was like, what? Arts? So in 2016, we collaborated with the Museum of Science and Tech, and actually they wanted, for the Canada 150 Gala, they wanted to have a steampunk theme, and they actually wanted in the gala to have a wearable fashion show, right? So we actually opened this to our students, and many of them were part of that gala and part of the wearable fashion show. Last year, we decided in 2017, and in preparation for the opening of the STEM building, we decided to put a challenge to our students. The challenge is to create an interactive art for the new STEM building. Let me show you what happened. Here is what happened. Actually, we ended up with 2 different projects that won. The first one is the stairs project. The students wanted people to take the stairs in the new building rather than take the elevators. So if you see here, these are the stairs of the new building, and this is the interactive art piece. And if you actually look from this side, you will see it, kind of from the windows overlooking there. So, and you'll say, okay, that looks like a great art, but how is that related to engineering? Actually, through all these stairs, there are sensors. And as the number of people on the sensors increase, the speed changes. This light change, you could see 2 lights here, purple and blue. So that was one. The second one is actually what is called the surface tension project. And the idea here is a representation of the Ottawa River. And not only that, but as you interact with the piece, the piece starts moving. And if you don't believe me, you can actually look at here. The one in pink is Minister Duncan interacting, the Minister of Science, interacting with the piece at the opening of the STEM building. And as actually she would move her hand, there is a camera right there, and it moves as if the movement of the Ottawa River. So that brings me to my last slide, which is, I hope I convey to you that we're training our students in a different way at the University of Ottawa. I hope I convey to you that, the idea of that students can be ready for the marketplace. We're trying to address that at the university with challenges, of course, but we are trying to address it. And I believe that there is a lot of potential for collaboration. So I'd like to invite everybody to think of coming to the University of Ottawa, coming to the new STEM building and our seed facilities as a start, but there are a number of things you can do. So internships and co-op opportunities is a no-brainer, but also think about clients for student projects. We have lots and lots of student projects every semester. I'd welcome you to talk to me and or talk to anybody else in the university about student projects. It's useful for the students. You don't pay anything. You don't actually put a lot of commitment of your time. It's 3 times within a semester, but potentially you can get a lot out of that. I also, design challenges is one of the things that maybe you can try with our students. You could see what can come out of our students. We have a design challenge actually every year. The next design challenge is at the end of November, so anybody has a big idea, I'm all ears. We can make-a-thons or hackathons is something we can do at the university, and again, it's a way for you to understand talent and see talent for yourself within a sort of weekend, so you can suggest a problem and we can work on it. It doesn't need to be only engineering, it could be multidisciplinary with a number of faculties such as art and engineering or social science and engineering. It's sort of your choice. And if nothing else, come to our competitions. Our design day happens this month on November 29th. I'd welcome anybody to come. It's half a day, not too much of your time, but we'll give you a flavor of what I'm talking about. So that's it for me. And here is some contact information in terms of email, website, and so on. And I can take any questions.